Uncommon Sense with Junia Doan, sharing the wisdom and insight of those who have been there and done that.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to Uncommon Sense. An especially warm welcome to those of you who are tuning in for the first time. This is a chance to be together with my guests, real people, real life, as they've experienced it, learned from it, and lived it. My guest today is Brian Darcy James, someone I've admired for a very long time, although I have just only met him a few minutes ago. Some years back, he was in a performance of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. In fact, he had the title role. And my husband and I went, and I was so enchanted with his energy and his clarity of voice and the pitch that I made it a point of going back for the remaining number of shows that were performed. It's true. I did. It's like a groupie. But in later years, I've admired him for another reason. And that is that he's very generous. He has a streak of generosity that runs through his relationships to the people in our area. Since his performance in Joseph, he's moved to New York and he's appeared in Broadway and other things. So he has had a diverse life. So Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Junia.
And one of the questions I might ask you is, there's so much in the way of opportunity and closed doors when you get into the theater world. How do you pump yourself up when you get rejected, when you get a closed door?
Well, I think it starts from what you learn and what you've been taught in terms of the profession. By that I mean you can have a great education as to the technique of acting and the skills to do it, and getting the opportunities is another situation. So I think the tough skin or the thick skin is developed through experience, and so I think it's a combination of getting to have those experiences and getting knocked down a few times, which is pretty much inevitable in this business, but also having underlying that is a strong desire to actually want to get back up and do it again. And I think that's basically what every performer or anybody in show business innately has running through their veins is the desire to actually do what they want to do. And that is, I think, usually the driving force of perseverance, and for everybody, but particularly in show business, is the desire to do it.
Do you feel more alive when you're on stage, when you say driven to get up and go do it again?
I don't know if I necessarily feel a difference between that feeling feeling alive when I'm actually acting or performing, or as opposed to real life.
Right.
I think the difference for me is having the outlet to express my creativity and to utilize my talent or my skill that I've learned through that outlet. That, I think, is what makes me feel like I'm getting a chance to do what it is that I desire, and you don't always get that,
Yes.
Not only as an actor but in life you don't necessarily get to fulfill all the desires and dreams that you have, which doesn't necessarily mean you should not have a dream or a desire, but you don't always get a chance to do that.
Life isn't fair.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the opportunity to exercise that is what makes me feel most alive.
When you first moved to New York, and I can ask this because I was born and raised in New York, in Manhattan, and you're a child of the Midwest, and I am now a Midwesterner. How did you find adjusting to the New York way of being? I mean, how people act. What did you have to learn?
Well, my first reaction was I was very nervous about moving to the city, just because it was an unknown place, and it was looming, and it was large, and it was ominous, and my perception of it was one thing. But when I got there, what struck me immediately was that it was just another city. I went to school in Chicago, so I was used to at least being exposed to metropolis, and New York obviously is one of a kind. But I think what I learned is that oftentimes you have a perception of one thing that can shut you down or perhaps cause fear, as opposed to the reality in that case, which was I can function here just fine. It's just it's another city. It just has streets like the other city I was in. It's got buildings. It's just more of it and more concentrated. But in terms of how the people were, it's a definitely a different. There's an honesty and kind of an instinctive quality about the way people live their lives in New York City, and oftentimes wonderful, oftentimes annoying. So it's I think you learn pretty quickly whether or not you want to tolerate it and experience it. A lot of people get there and think, oh, this either moves too fast for me, or it's too abrasive, or it's too in your face. And certainly I've felt that way over the years about some of the social problems that you are exposed to in a very direct way in a big city, and that can be overwhelming. But I think also the flip side of that is that you can learn from what it is that is true. In other words, if you experience things like homelessness in a way that I never had before, or poverty, you can see it and learn from it, and perhaps do something to combat that or help solve that problem.
You know, when I go to New York, it just takes me a few minutes till I sort of click on. Do you find you are, I don't want to say a different person, but a different speed?
Absolutely.
Here and there?
Absolutely. I find that I get very impatient if someone's walking too slowly. You know, if I'm not in New York, you know, the style of service is for the most part, you know, at a normal level. Everywhere else, there it's fast, and people expect things fast, and so it does take a bit of an adjustment, you know, either going into it or getting out of it.
When one has talent like you do, or a writer, or almost anybody really do want to share their talents with the world in whatever way they can, how do you create opportunity?
Well, I think the first thing is perseverance. You can't, you know, you can't dance if you don't go to the dance, and so I think the number one thing is you have to kind of be willing to insert yourself into the equation that needs to be solved. So you don't necessarily get the chance if you sit on the sidelines, and so that takes perseverance and courage and belief and confidence in what you're doing. And I do believe that comes from experience. And from my point of view, after being in New York for, you know, a year or two, after you kind of get into that mode and you get into the required you know, mode of behavior, it starts to come, and you start to realize how to create opportunities. You know, all the practical things. If you're dealing specifically with acting, getting an agent, getting the trade papers to know what's out there in terms of the auditions that are coming, knowing the casting directors, knowing the people who are producers, just knowing the lay of the land. I mean, that's one practical way of being available for opportunity.
So you really have to know how the lay of the land is, and then walk the land, as it were.
Exactly. Like any business, you should know how it functions and who the people are that are you know, turning the wheels, and you know, what's required in terms of not only the jobs that are out there, but how to get the jobs and protocol and things like that. At the same time, you have to be true to yourself and kind of take care of your skill and develop your skill. And so it's a constant tuning of oneself. Not only the person, but also the way the person fits into the system.
Right. I always thought years ago that the secret of life is that it's a little like log rolling down this turbulent river. You just have to keep adjusting.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, to navigate it all, but you have to change too. So
you do. That's hard too. It's hard, especially when you know, when you're used to X, Y, and Z, and life offers A, B, and C. I think the sooner you realize that you're not always going to get what you want, and adjust to what is, that becomes, I think, the key to, if not success, the key to at least perseverance.
How did you do that?
Well, I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's just a question of if your desire to do what you want to do, and if it's giving you enough happiness, if it's making you satisfied, I think that kind of takes care of itself, because then the experience over time, you have that. Yeah, you have a wherewithal as to how things happen, and after a while, you know that being told no, or being told that you're not right for this, isn't a personal affront. It's just the way things are. It doesn't mean that you're not talented, or that you're not worthy of getting a job. It just means that this time's not right. And so you learn very quickly that there will be a time when everything is right. And so if you believe in that, that's when you get those opportunities, when the good things will single-handedly outweigh all of the negatives. And so it's a balance of those things.
But that's a wonderful thing to learn, that it really isn't about you. It's just, it didn't...
Yeah, it's a hard thing to learn, too.
It is
because,
a hard
thing. I'd say most of the time I believe it. And there are some times when it's hard not to take it personally, you know. But I think most actors definitely have that skin and have learned that. You have to, otherwise you wouldn't get out of bed. You wouldn't continue to pursue it, because it would just be too debilitating, paralyzing. To every time you went up for a job, someone said no. I mean, that's 90% of it.
Is there a lot of insincerity in that profession? I've
found that the stereotype, and I think there's truth in the stereotype, that Los Angeles, as opposed to New York, in terms of how people in the industry communicate their desires or their misgivings, it's a little less sincere in LA. There seems to be more of a veneer of, hey, you're great, everything's good, everything's fantastic, the sun is shining, and aren't we all happy? Whereas in New York, you get a good sense, pretty cut and dry sense of how things are. And I think that's definitely much more valuable and helpful.
What wisdom did your parents teach you that you took into your life as you live it today?
Well, I think my family and my parents are definitely the reason why I've been able to succeed and why I continue to do what I do. The wisdom that they taught me probably is having a belief in yourself, and if what you want to do makes you happy and gives you satisfaction, then you have to work hard. You have a responsibility to work hard to live up to that that desire, that talent, or that thing that makes you happy. And in this case, you know, wanting to act and wanting to perform requires a lot of work and attention, and it's not all. It rarely does it have to do with your ability. Really, it has to do with your perseverance. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. But also just having the support from my mother and father growing up, and the encouragement, those things can go a long way, especially from people you respect and love, like I do my mom and dad. So that's really the basis of it all. So that's carried me pretty much all the way in terms of, you know, my goals and my career.
That's wonderful. Not everybody has that kind of a background.
It's true. I learned that too when I went to college, because it was the first time I really got it, especially when you're dealing with a bunch of 18-year-old boys and girls, essentially, who are pursuing a career in the arts, and it's a unique calling, if you will, to say the least. And you know, I found very quickly that most of the people there, most of the kids that I met, had to battle a lot of demons to be able to kind of just go down that road, and that was striking to me, because I never really had that issue. It was always a green light for me to kind of pursue it, and I realized how lucky I was, you know, in comparison, relatively speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you have to do to stay in shape?
Physically and mentally?
Yes. I mean, it just seems that there'd be a lot of, we all have to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, for whatever it is we do, but since you are your instrument, as it were, what do you have a routine?
Not necessarily. I find that if I'm doing a show, if I have to sing, you know, taking lessons, being in lessons and coaching sessions, and physically working on the voice, and making sure that, you know, it's like going to the vocal gym, I call it. You just have to be sure that your vocal cords are strong enough to kind of do the job that you've been asked to do. And
What allows for that?
What allows for?
Yes, that your vocal cords are strong enough. What do you have
exercises, you know, basically singing exercises, and you know, being able to control your breathing, and knowing how the whole apparatus works, and being in tune with that, and just knowing how the machine works, really, and keeping that strong. I've also find that when I'm working, it's a lot of the time that exercise comes with the job, and just by definition of having to do it 8 times a week, you are building strength through repetition, to put it.
When you're in a show, but it's true of anyone who has a job, how do you keep yourself fresh?
It's a great question, especially when you're doing a really long run. I'd be lying if I said that sometimes it wasn't hard. I think it's a combination of things. If the material that you're working on is good and is rich and has a spirit that you can key into and that you relate to, that can fuel you for quite a while. And then along with that, if you have technique, if you've learned basically how to act and how to use, you know, the technique of acting, that can carry you along as well. So once it gets hard and boring and you lose a little bit of the inspiration, that's when you kick in technique. And you know, there are jobs that you get to the point where you think, oh, this is hard, and I'm not really into this as I was, you know, 2-3 months ago. And but then you realize this is my job. You know, this is the equivalent of my going to work and you know, doing the math, the accounting that needs to take place, or you know, buying the goods that need to be in the store. I mean, that's what I do, and so I better do it.
You know, I have always, in a sense, felt sorry for famous people, because I think their fame sort of separates them a little bit from normal responses from people. Have you, am I wrong? Have you experienced anything like that?
Well, I certainly haven't. I've certainly, myself, I know people who, in this business, who have achieved great success and who are famous. And it's different in each case. I think it depends on the individual. It's very. I think again, I'm just from looking at some of these people, and I think it must be very overwhelming to all of a sudden have to be inundated with a flood of recognizability, and how that affects you. I'm talking about like movie stars and television stars.
Right.
That's got to be hard. But I think if you are, if you realize, I'm speaking, and this is conjecture, if you believe that that's part of the possibility of the byproduct of what you do, and you can kind of remain true to yourself and have a stable full of friends and you know, supportive family, and I think that's enough to kind of keep you steering in the right direction.
To keep you right, a real person.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not put too much emphasis on what defines you as opposed to how you define yourself.
Right.
If you allow the public to, you know, define you as that guy on that show, you might buy into that, and you might lose your bearing a little bit. But if you can, you know, if you can have a life where you have friends and you know, enjoy
separate from.
Yeah, that keeps you healthy, I think.
Has mistakes taught you anything?
Has which?
Mistakes.
Mistakes. Absolutely. You learn what not to do. You know, you learn how to avoid either, you know, patterns of behavior or basic things that are not the right thing to do in terms of. I'm thinking specifically of auditioning and how to get a job, and you know, how to go about, you know, doing the things that might be best for you to get that job, as opposed to maybe making some mistakes that would prevent you from getting a job. And I don't have any concrete examples, but I do know that once you make a mistake, you know it, and if you don't correct it, then oftentimes you'll find yourself back in that same situation.
When you audition, is there such a thing, not necessarily as luck, but like time of day, how fresh is the producer or director who's watching you?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question, because at the end of the day, if someone's seen 100 people, their interest level has probably waned, and right after lunch is not necessarily a great time because people their stomachs are full, and
right.
I mean, this is all theory, of course, but
yeah,
I mean, it's a crapshoot. You never really know how and why things align to allow you to get a job, but there are certainly a lot of factors that probably go into why you don't.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, I don't know, like that. I mean, a whimsical thing, like, attention being altered by too much turkey in one's stomach, or a disruptive phone call that doesn't allow someone's attention to be on you at the right time. But I do think that if you walk into a room and you kind of hit it out of the park, that's not going to be ignored. That's the right thing, I think, becomes apparent very quickly in terms of an audition.
How does one avoid being typecast?
It's hard. I've tried to be diligent about creating opportunities that go beyond the perception of me being a singer, a musical theater person, if you will. And the ways that I've been able to do that are to seek out plays that aren't musical, and to be involved in things that exercise a different muscle, an acting muscle for me, and also allow people to see me in a different way. A great example currently that might answer that question is Charlize Theron, the actress who's getting a lot of acclaim for Monster, the movie. I haven't seen it, but I have seen her, and I know that the perception of her as this beautiful actress and the perception of this actress playing a character is widely different. So that if done right can have a huge effect, a positive effect in terms of an acting career. And I think you have to be willing to take that risk. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and do that, because no one's gonna do that for you. That's for sure.
So you have to seek.
You do. You have to
to stretch.
Yeah. Here's an example of I did a show called The Good Thief, which was a one-man play about an Irish thug, written by an Irish playwright that I had seen in Scotland, of all places, with my wife, and it was this fantastic play. And about 2 years later, I saw that it was being done in New York with this theater company obscure little theater company that I knew the artistic director. But something in me knew that I needed to play that part, and I needed to get in front of that guy and audition for this role. And through a series of bizarre coincidences, I was able to make that happen. Coincidence half, but also half was effort on my part to get to make the calls, to get my manager and get my agent to say, look, our client needs to audition for this. Could you see him? As it turned out, this guy who had only met a couple of times, the director, who now is a really good friend of mine, he had me on a list of people that he wanted to see, and that was pretty interesting, because I wouldn't have necessarily thought of me to play that part, and as it turned out, I got it, and it was very rewarding for me.
Do you believe in being called to do something like this part?
I don't know. I don't think so, to be honest. I think ultimately you make decisions to do what you want to do, and I think if your heart's in the right place, most of the time you are rewarded with putting yourself out there. I would reserve the word calling for people with perhaps more direct and, in my estimation, more noble causes, like humanitarian aid in Africa, or Doctors Without Borders, or I guess I put that on a different level. I mean, I think that's a calling to kind of use one's own ability as a human being to help other people. I know that the arts is extremely important in that sense, but I also feel that if I didn't do this, I could utilize myself in a positive way that could just as easily be called a calling. You know? So I don't know.
Does it help to have friends that are outside the profession or inside the profession?
Both,
Both.
for different reasons.
Yeah.
But you know, the people that are on the inside who are successful or who are just at the same level or who aren't at the same level, you can always see where you've come from and where you're going and
Yes.
how to get there through the work of others. And then the outside people, you know, remind you that there are the things going on other than, you know, what movie just opened, did best at the box office. You know, there are politics happening in the world. There are things to be paid attention to that don't necessarily require, you know, The Rock or. So there's perspective is always good.
Yeah, it is good. We want to thank Brian today for being with us and for sharing. He has taught us many important things. One is that rejection is not personal, and it's very important to realize that sometimes it is just not a good fit. He has taught us that it's important to also try to use your talents. His are in the theatrical area, but it applies to everybody who's watching, and myself included, and to find them early, and nevertheless, even to find them sequentially. He has talked about preparation. He has talked about you have to be excited about what you do, but in the end, that you have to discipline yourself to carry it through even when you don't want to do it, and it is not particularly fun. He has talked about the importance of doing, in his case, vocal exercises to support his performances. He has talked about the idea of what I call stretching, seeing yourself outside of what you usually do. And he has made an effort to find people who could be part of that solution, might be doing interesting things. He talked about a particular one-man play that he was the play, in essence. He talked about it's important to have people in your field as friends just to sort of be in that flow of information and where you've been and where you're going, and also to have friends outside so that you realize that you're part of a bigger picture, if I may say that, and that what your world is you know, just part of the picture, and that in his case he was very blessed by having a family that was supportive and loving, that not everybody in his profession has that opportunity. He also talked about that there are differences in how people act, but not necessarily people. Geographically, that New York is a little faster paced, a little bit more direct. One gets a little quicker tempo. He talked about LA perhaps being a little more insincere than the city, but mostly he said one has to be resilient. One has to really find the way to fit and to make it work. And if it doesn't work, to persist. The overwhelming message was perseverance. So in your life, persevere. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you another time. And remember, kindness counts. Hold the door for someone, bring them food, smile. Thanks so much. See you next time. And thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Junia.
To share your comments and suggestions, contact Junia. The email address is juniadone@aol.com or write to Post Office Box 169, Midland, Michigan 48640.